On today's Lions Gray Mains, we've got a new bonus offensive mind on staff. Plus, we try to piece together the puzzle that is the Lions offensive line in the offseason, as well as a haul of the underrated induction for a player who gave a whole new meaning to the phrase safety dance. Forward down the field.
Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And off Barry. Skirts to the left side. Breaks the tackle. And he will take it in. Touchdown!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. That's what I'm talking about. It is caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh, baby, what a play that time. Aiden Hutchinson read that and blew it up. Big time.
Yeah, big time. This is Lions Gray Mains. It's Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's time for us to go live and talk with you, the Detroit Lions fans. I'm joined on the screen from my confidants, my co-pilots, my co-hosts, and my friends. Please welcome Dan Keener and Dr. Brent Kreider. Fellas, how are we doing? It's the off season. We're watching other teams beat the crap out of each other, and we, I don't know. How do we feel about the Lions off season thus far? Hot takes.
Brent's sweater says it all.
For those just listening with your earballs, it says Red Wings. Brent, this is the first time you've not had Lions stuff on. Did you not do your laundry this week? I see Red Wings.
Well, I counted my Lion shirts. I have 183 Lion shirts, so I didn't run out of Lion shirts. That's for sure. But it's cold here in Alabama, and I know it's really cold up in Michigan. Been watching the -11, -7. Dan, I hope you and your family are keeping warm in Ohio.
Doing all right.
Mike up in Grayling. Mike in the back office here. Mike, thanks for all you do on the research. We really, really appreciate you, brother. And so,
What, you don't care about me, Brent? You don't care about what's
going
going on in Atlanta? Come on, man.
Like, put on the sweatshirt. Why not the Red Wings sweatshirt?
Exactly.
Apparently the internet down there doesn't like as cold either, so
Well, you live down here with me.
he's all frozen.
Yeah, Brent, you're frozen a little bit, but we're gonna circle back with you, Brent, because
You're down here with me.
We've got some some breaking news that we want to talk about for Lions fans, and it has to do with the coaching staff. This is a bit of a surprise, but we're going to talk really quickly because Mike Kafka, who interviewed for the Lions offensive coordinator position, we talked about this last week. Drew Petzing was announced as our offensive coordinator, but the Lions have added Mike Kafka to the offensive staff. The NFL Network called it a high-ranking role, so we'll know maybe specifically what that is. But Kafka is widely known across the NFL as like he's had a really crazy kind of coaching trajectory. I mean, he's only 38. He was a Northwestern quarterback. He was 5 years on staff with Andy Reid with the Chiefs. And he was a QC coach. He was a QB coach. He was a passing game coordinator. So he's a part of what, Patrick Mahomes and what was happening there. And then, of course, he was with the Giants as offensive coordinator under Daboll. And Lions fans, if you remember, when we played the Giants, Daboll was fired, and Kafka actually was actually head coach. Interim head coach for the Giants, and some crazy offensive plays during that game, including a touchdown pass to Jameis Winston, which made my man Derek Barnes look a little silly. But in any event, Kafka interviewed for multiple head coaching jobs in the cycle. He interviewed for the Titans. He interviewed for OC positions with the Bucks, with the Eagles. So the Lions really have kind of snagged someone, I think, kind of like a bonus, almost a bonus offensive coordinator here. So Brent, I'm going to start with you. It hasn't been announced yet, but this high ranking suggests that it's more than just a position coach. What do you make of this hire? Given that Petzing already has the OC title, what role do you think makes sense for Kafka in this structure?
It's an interesting design. I'm not sure I've ever seen this type of a coaching structure. I don't know if you or Dan or Mike have, but having multiple guys who we would consider to be talented offensive coordinators um, coming in is really, I think, an overreaction to how poorly things went last year. The Lions owner said, Sheila said, "Hey, we're gonna fix these things," and boy, are they! And giving Dan Campbell the opportunity to bring in two talented offensive play callers, it's what I would say is a smorgasbord of opportunities. And so the best thing that can happen is that they make him a offensive coordinator slash co-offensive coordinator slash head coach. I think we'll see something, assistant head coach, something like that when you say it's going to be a senior ranking person. I know we have an assistant head coach right now, but look, this is Super Bowl or bust. You see the Lions going here. We didn't get Mike McDaniel. He wanted to go to sunny Southern California. Fair riddance to him. And so, the good news for the Lions is we've got two very talented guys to come in and design plays. It appears that Kafka is not going to be the play caller because the Lions specifically announced that the Arizona coach would be coming in and calling the plays. Yep, thank you. And so the very important thing for the Lions is get some diversity in there, be able to take advantage of the talent that we have. I'm looking forward to later in the show because one of the things that we teed up related to this is the offensive line. Right. So Dan, over to you to give your thoughts on it. But
I wanted to ask you this specifically, Dan. Do you see this as, because I think we're immediately think, okay, we got two great, almost like an offensive brain trust, right? We didn't get Mike McDaniel, right? But we got like an up and comer, like two up and comers, right? Do you think it's like an offensive brain trust approach, or could this be maybe too many cooks in the kitchen?
I think this is a yin to a yang, right? You have a guy in Petzing who is a very accomplished run game coach, and you have a guy in Kafka who is a very accomplished passing game coach. So together, the two of them, it's the Wonder Twins, right? You bring them in and you let them work together and collaborate, and between the two of them, they put together and utilize Campbell's structure and what he likes to do, and they can create some hopefully out of this world based off those little spaceships going through Brent's screen, some out of this world play calling and plays that we're going to see. So I think it's a great complimentary hire. It's a there's a bunch of other coaches, a bunch of other news around our coaching staff that I think directly relates to this. We've got two guys on staff, in David Shaw, who's currently our passing coordinator, and Scotty Montgomery, who Brent referenced as the assistant head coach, and he's also the wide receivers coach, I believe, this year or last year. And we also have an open tight end coach position. So the only thing that's a senior offensive position is that assistant head coach title if you're not the OC. So, and obviously Kafka, he has interim experience, now with the Giants. So that might be something they toss his way. But, I think, Brent, you brought it up earlier in the week, just in our internal Slack. You've got Montgomery. He's interviewing for the Ravens OC position. I can't see him getting it. The only time he was an OC before this was at Maryland under Loxley, and they were atrocious. But hey, the mentor was in Baltimore at the time, so maybe he saw something and liked it. They were only a few miles down the road, right? But I think the bigger one here is that I have no, no proof of this, but the tea leaves to me seem to be showing that David Shaw is going to go back and join Jim Harbaugh at Los Angeles Chargers. His kid today just committed to Stanford. I mean, I know it's 3 hours up the road in, San Francisco area, right? But Shaw is the passing game coordinator. He was passed over by the Lions for the OC position, which went to first to Petzing, and now they're bringing in Kafka on top of that. So if I'm Shaw, I'm thinking, well, hell, I'm never going to get I'm never going to get
Yeah.
promoted internally.
Yeah.
His buddy, he worked for Harbaugh twice, once at San Diego, followed him to Stanford, and then ultimately replaced him at Stanford when Harbaugh went to San Francisco. So there's a huge, a very long line of relationship there. So if someone's leaving, I suspect it'll be Shaw, and we're going to probably see Campbell retool the offensive staff. And then on top of that, our old buddy Tanner Engstrom got canned by the Jets after 1 year of their
I
offensive
saw that.
coordinator position today. So
Yep.
could that be a reunion either here, or could, our buddy Benedict over in Chicago decide he wants to snap him up?
Hmm.
He might be better suited to be in that structure of where he's been the last several years, versus being on his own under Glenn, with just an absolute abysmal cast to work with, and not having that offensive mentorship around him that he had with Johnson and Campbell and some of these other guys over the years. So
Yeah. So I remember when Angstrom went over to the Jets, and everybody was like, "Oh God, there goes our offensive coordinator." Right? Aaron Glenn took him to the Jets, and then, But to be fair, I mean the quarterbacks that they had to work with over there in the Jets, I felt like a scapegoat over
woof.
there. Yeah, woof.
I mean,
for
he's
sure.
cleaved half his staff, like literally. I don't know if that's because he got guys late. Campbell cut a few guys. He had to bring some guys in to fill some roles because when he got hired, and year two is the year you try to fine tune your staff. So, but that's a lot of guys that Glenn has gotten rid of. I mean, he might not even make it another year the way things are going.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything, Brent, that you have to add with the Shaw thing? I think when Shaw got added to the staff, I kind of felt like he wouldn't be long. I mean, obviously he's had a history, more high level at college with Stanford, but certainly is well respected within the NFL. And Dan makes some good points there. Brent, any thoughts on the coaching carousel that's going on here?
David Shaw was never a top tier coach. I mean, he had a few good seasons at Stanford, but
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't a guy that I ever felt like was going to be an eventual coordinator, head coach in the NFL. I think he was much like, you placed Johnny Morton 3 years ago when he was with the Lions the first time as an offensive consultant. And you bring in guys like Shaw and Morton to be those advisors, to be the consultants. And I never felt like he was going to be the guy. He didn't strike me in that way. Ingstrom, Tanner, him getting fired, Dan, there was a lot of folks that wanted to keep him in Detroit. And I think what time has suggested is that there's a reason why Dan Campbell, because I feel confident that if the Lions had wanted to keep him, home team advantage kind of thing, they could have re-signed him to stay, and he went with Aaron Glenn, and so doesn't surprise me at all that he got canned.
Yeah, your Shaw comments. I got just posted in our little chat here. He seems like a guy who's ideally fit to be somebody's like number two, right? He's that lieutenant, that first lieutenant, the guy that is meant to be that, if you're not there, this guy can fill in capably, and he didn't get fired from Stanford. He quit because he
Mm-hmm.
had 3-9 seasons on the
3 and 9
heels of
seasons.
3 winning and bowl seasons and winning he had some really good seasons there for the first few years, and I think he ran out of Harbaugh's players. You know how that
Yeah.
goes, right? At college, you run out of the previous guy's players, and if you're not a good recruiter, then you're kind of stuck. So, and then the thing about Engstrom, I think he just got tapped too early, right? He
Mm-hmm.
feels like he's a kid that needed another few years somewhere to, kind of what they were doing with Montgomery, even though Montgomery's not a kid. You need to move him around to some other roles within the organization to get the full experience and make him a well-rounded coach before you start throwing that kind of leadership and that type of play calling on them. So,
And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he came back, as you were just suggesting, Dan. And to what a place to be with the situation that the Lions are going to have in terms of the experience at the senior levels underneath Dan Campbell. And he, if he is, I'm a big believer in the Peter principle.
Yeah.
We all rise to the level of our incompetence. There's something to be said for that. And maybe he is a career position coach, career analyst, as I was kind of just talking about with Shaw. But the reality is that if Campbell wants him, then it wouldn't surprise me that he's back in Detroit as a position coach or as an offensive analyst to develop.
I suspect if Johnson gets his OC poached, he's interviewing somewhere else today. If Johnson gets some of his staff poached from Chicago, I suspect that's the kid's next stop, to be honest. He's already got a handful of those younger guys that we had, like JT Barrett and stuff. So, and Heinz Ward and stuff. So I would not be surprised if that he ends up in one of those two spots. I just can't see him going anywhere else at this point, and I'm sure the Lions would have a role for him if they, as you said, if they want him, they'll have a role for him if he wants to come back. But if he's got a better option somewhere else, I don't think they're gonna get in a bidding war for the guy.
Yeah, but I mean, what a difference this year from last year, right? You got Kafka and Petzing, a lot of experience, the right sort of development, we talked a little bit about Andy Reid, his coaching tree, and these folks are from some very prominent coaching hierarchies that they've grown up in. And to have, and I loved it. I hadn't even thought of that, Dan, what you said earlier about the passing game coordinator and the running game coordinator. And I just see the Lions kind of pushing all their chips into the middle of the table. Yeah. And, as we talk later about, what moves need to happen in free agency, specifically around the offensive line, I think we're going to see a very, very aggressive Detroit Lions back office posturing themselves to be able to, not only have the best coaches that they can have, but field the best players. You look great, Dan, by the way. I mean, you're perfectly centered now, and you're right there in the middle of Ford Field. So
you guys get a room. Here I'm just going to footnote with this. We're going to talk about the folks that are here in the chat, and we're going to segue on. But I will say this. That's great that we have all these great minds here on the offense. But last time I checked, the issue isn't necessarily on our offense, the offensive side of the ball. Clearly, we needed somebody to help out as an offensive coordinator and play calling with Morton being gone. But let's see what happens on the defensive side of the ball, where not only do we need talent but also coaching. Yeah,
your point is well taken. However, anybody who's been through any kind of coaching, right? Mm-hmm. Executive coaching, management coaching, team leader coaching, that you're taught to focus on your strengths. Too many people that focus on, the areas that they're weak in.
That's right.
And they fail to play up their strengths. And so, look, the Lions offense is one of the best in the NFL. What I would like to see next year is, stack up that offensive line with some players and with these minds, with the skill position players. And for the love of God, can we please have some healthy players for a full season, right? Because we have been decimated the past 2 years. Yeah. And so I just hope that we're able to keep healthy on the offensive side of the ball, because that is the Lions' strength. And I got no issues with drafting heavy focus on the defensive side of the ball. We need to signing a couple of free agents, re-signing Anzalone, as we talked about. But the bottom line is that we need to continue to make sure that offense is humming along and scoring a lot of points when they need to.
And Chris, to your, to your point, one of the things that, I think we've talked about that kind of hurt us this year was just a lack of continuity with all the coaches that we lost, across the board. It wasn't just two coordinators. We lost a bunch of position coaches
11.
on both sides of the ball.
11 total.
And And that's the final piece of coaching news we have, is that we actually retained Jim O'Neill, and this is the guy who's been tasked with coaching our safeties the last 2 years.
Mhm.
And, despite the fact that they struggled a bit, obviously with injury this year, look at what we got out of our backups. Those guys actually played fairly well for us when they came in, until they started getting dinged up too. So, but he interviewed for the Jets defensive coordinator position, and the Lions worked out a deal to bring him back, probably giving him a raise and, um, maybe a little bit different title or something, a little extra sweetener there, But the thing about it is it keeps the entire defensive staff intact right now, because nobody is at this point is leaving. You've got everybody back, so that's year 2 of an entire staff working together in harmony. And, to Brent's point, these injuries on defense just killed us this year. The linebackers were fairly healthy, other than like Rodrigo. The right side of the line had issues, but we also had multiple guys, including our 2 studs, coming back from major offseason injury that took them a while. I don't think McNeil ever looked right.
Right.
He'll be fine, I believe, in the long run this year. But it took Hutch. You look at what Hutch ended up doing. The guy had 14 and a half sacks, and he was like top 10 and top 5 in like almost every
Yeah,
category.
you could see him trending up. Yeah.
Yeah, he literally every game he got better. His head got more confident in his body. And he by the end of the season he was playing like the guy that was just tearing it up last year, the first 5 games, right? I think McNeil will come back with an off season to get better. You've got to solve that end opposite him. We'll figure it out, whether it's draft pick or whichever. I don't think that other defensive tackle spots a problem. I think Tyleik Williams is going to come in and do really well. They're probably going to hopefully re-sign Lopez, and if they want to bring Reeder back on a cheap deal and keep him as like give him 15 snaps a game, so be it. I think it would actually help him as he gets a little older, and let him focus, just go nuts for a few snaps a game. But that defensive backfield, to Brent's point, we gotta get people that come in and healthy. We have a lot of talent back there. Arnold is a talent. And a lot of people never saw Ennis Rakestraw play because unfortunately he's got these hamstring issues. That kid was a freaking monster at Missouri. He was a fabulous player, and it's a shame we haven't been able to see him on the field. And I think people will be surprised if we ever get to see him how good he can be. So,
Agree. But we're not here to talk about the defense. I'm sorry, I took us there, and we're so passionate that we could talk all day about both sides, all 3 phases of. But we're here to talk about the offensive line. But before we get to that, I want to shout out all the folks in the chat that are joining us. And if you're out there in the interwebs, on whatever the tube that you're on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or X or Twitch or wherever you're at, chime in, let us know how you're feeling in the off season. Give us a temperature check. But as always, Wanda Rich in the house. Hi guys, so glad to see your smiling faces. Everybody smile for Wanda. All right. Wanda, thanks again for joining us. Helpful Chase in the house. Up, guys. Appreciate you joining us each and every week. Helpful Chase. And we've got Detroit or DET fan man. Exactly, because I'm excited to see these coaching improvements on offense. Now let's do the defense. How about like we got the smartest chat in the business right here. Let's get to the defense. I blame Wingo's benching and Aleem's poor play on Casey Rogers' poor scheme fit. Well, we got a hot take in the chat on that one. That's for another show. Chase says Brad Holmes needs to have a great offseason this year. Too many super short contracts. Would have loved to see Lopez on a 2 to 3 year deal. Yeah, listen, he had to prove it, and he certainly did. So that's part of the, when you sign a guy like that, that's the yin and the yang. Does he want to be here? And let's see, Amik, same after year one to offer that extension. AQM, same. AQM's a little older, so that's a whole nother conversation before we...
Anzalone went back-to-back one-year deals before he got a 3-year deal.
There you go. There you go.
It can be done.
Chase, great takes tonight. We appreciate you, man. A lot of holes to fill. Offensive line, secondary, linebackers. We only have 2 under contract, of course. Edge as well. Chase, great takes, man. We appreciate you joining. We're going to cover defense in depth. Listen, offseason, we're live every week. We reposted it on the audio podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you're going to get Lions Gray Mains podcast. But gentlemen, let's roll to what we wanted to talk about, which is piecing together this offensive line puzzle. Let's lay out what we know, and then I'm going to roll it over to you guys. Taylor Decker might retire. Frank Ragnow, did retire, unretired, probably not happening. Injury history, obviously concerning. Glasgow likely played his last snap in Honolulu Blue. Of course, Iguacan got poached to Cleveland's roster. Mahogany, up and down year, broke his leg. Manu showed flashes, and sometimes defensive ends flash past him. So, is he the answer? Right. So the Lions are staring at some potential turnover at 3 positions: left tackle, center, right guard. There's talk of, these players moving around, depth questions everywhere. Okay. This is pretty much, I think we can agree, one of the biggest offseason puzzles that Brad Holmes has to face heading into the draft, what we're going to do with the existing players. So Brent, let's start with you. What's your read? Let's talk about Taylor Decker. What's your read on where Decker's head's at? What should the Lions be planning on regardless of his decision?
Well, is Taylor Decker past his prime? I think we would all agree that Father Time's undefeated.
Yep.
And listen, he's been a warrior, and the tea leaves seem to be indicating that once you start thinking about retirement, as boxers always talk about, you're retired. And so I think the Lions should learn their lessons from last year. And there were hints that Ragnow was going to retire. He told them, in May, according to reports before the draft, that he was going to retire. And so they drafted a couple guys. But the offensive line, we're going to have to invest heavily in that. I think that it's time for Decker to move on, either of his own accord or the Lions' accord. Take what money that we would have in cap savings, and I'm sure Dan knows off the top of his head what that dollar amount would be, and either move Penei Sewell over to the left side and draft a right tackle, or look at free agents. There's a ton of free agent right tackles. So I know I went a little bit beyond what you asked, but it's hard to answer the question without sort of saying, hey, I think these are the steps that you need to take if you move on from him. And I wouldn't be upset at all if he told the Lions, I'm coming back next year. I think, he's a warrior, and I know a big part of the success that we've had over the last few years.
Yeah, it's all about that shoulder, right? I mean, Decker, if his shoulder is okay, he's still a decent left tackle, right? Yeah. But if his shoulder is, it gets down to like Frank's toe, right? There's a certain point where you're tired of putting your body through injuries and rehab and surgeries. So, I think it's 50-50 if he comes back for one more year. I think the Lions are committed this year to going all in, and I think Decker would want to be part of that. I don't see Ragnow coming back at all. It didn't seem like any indication once he learned that, he had meat torn off the bone, that he would be willing to do whatever he took to put that back together to come back. Which is a shame, I mean, the guy, if he's comfortable and he doesn't need that, if he can live his life without it, that's fantastic, right? But if it requires it to get repaired to come back, I just don't think he's probably willing to go that route. But who knows? Maybe we'll find out. Maybe he will show up, But regardless, Brent nailed it. We have our left tackle. It's already on the roster. His name's Penei Sewell. So, they talked to Caden Proctor, who was at the Senior Bowl, in an informal visit. They talked to him a little bit. That guy is best suited to play right tackle, but he's going to have to drop a little weight. He's very athletic. but he also gets beat by speed. So there's other tackles out there. I would highly recommend the kid from Miami. If he's there in the top, if he slips down to like 12 or 13, there's about 3 guys I would go in all in to move up for. Him, Caleb Downs, and forgot for some reason that Bain would slip down that far. I don't think so, but those are the kind of the guys you say, okay, these guys are too much of a difference maker to let slide any further. Kind of like we do with Terrion Arnold. They went up and got him because everybody kept ignoring cornerbacks, and the best cornerback or second best cornerback in that draft, he slid all the way down to like, what was it, 13 or 14 or something like that?
Yeah,
So
sometimes those teams, Dan, great point. Sometimes those teams that are up there at the top of the draft are there for a reason because they're dumb.
Yeah.
And they take shots on average quarterbacks that they could get 2 rounds later because they're in trouble. And that just, you sit back in a spot like 17 and you may end up getting some great players. I also like the other edge for a Miami that plays on the other side of Bain. I think Bain's top. He's a blue chip.
He's a top 5 guy. He's probably the best edge.
For sure.
Well, second him and a Texas Tech kid, I think, are the 2 best.
Chase says Jermaine Elemanor from, I guess he's the Giants tackle is an option. I haven't done any research there. Do you guys have any take on this player?
Not ready for draft prep yet.
He's a free agent, Dan. He plays for the Giants.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I haven't really delved into free agency. I said draft prep. I saw that article that Schlitt wrote for I think it was the Lions podcast or whoever he works for, where he basically went through and looked at anybody that Petzing was associated with that was a free agent coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And the only guys that really were of interest were the offensive linemen. I mean, there were some decent linemen on there, but I think a lot of them are past their prime. But Botano from Cleveland was on that list. He's a plug and play Zeitler style starter, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Will Hernandez is way past his prime. We've been asking to add him to our roster for like 15 years. It feels like in free agency. So I don't think that's happening. But there's some other guys on there. But Chris, I don't know if you want to throw up that graphic of what our roster looks like. Can you give me that visual one? Yeah, so that's not quite coming all the way through here, but so this is kind of a graphic that just shows, where we're at, and this is our roster as it sits. Decker and Glasgow, both those guys are, it's 50-50. They're going to get cut or retire, right? And, there'll be substantial cap savings with both that does that happen, but that's 2 big holes, even if Glasgow was playing not the greatest ball last year. So, realistically, our roster right now is Sewell probably at left tackle, Mahogany at left guard, Ratledge at either center or right guard. And then, we've got a couple guys that we've been grooming that you could put in there to, to be that right tackle or right guard. I am intrigued by Seth McLaughlin, to be the backup center.
Yep.
He's got his flaws. There's a reason he probably been drafted. What would we peg him at, Brent? About a 3rd rounder before he tore his Achilles, maybe 2nd. I mean, the guy won the Remington Award in college. So, Awasika's still there. Sorsdal, we don't even know what that kid can do. He hasn't shown a lot, but he's also been injured too. Yeah. So, Manu, I don't know.
It may be time to talk about cutting him if we do pick up some players, because I haven't seen anything yet from him, Dan, that would give me confidence.
I 100% agree. He's, I will say this, though, they're going to love the guy because he's bald. So, you got these other bald guys on the roster now. That's the big thing.
But the thing with Manu is that he has some glaringly bad plays that he made.
Yes.
And especially in the Bengals game when he came in and had to, and of course they put him one-on-one a couple times with Hendrickson, and that's just not fair. But he's got some glaringly bad plays, but then outside of that, I think he played decent. But it's like we can't do that. Like it's the full sample size.
Can't teach.
Right.
He has got size and he's got athleticism.
Yep.
And you can teach a guy how to play the position and the role. And Hank Fraley is one of the best in the game. So, maybe he gets moved to right tackle, where there's not as much pressure. He's not protecting the blind side of Goff then. I mean, I think Sewell is whoever, unless we somehow manage to land a blue chip left tackle, I think Penei is the left tackle for
Here
the
we
rest
go.
of his career.
Detroit
right?
fan man says, "Come on, guys, we got to see if Manu can play the skip role as the biggest tight end on the field. Can he catch?"
Yes.
He's a good athlete.
You know, as
He is
much
good
as we
athlete.
love Skip, you know, and still do it, and
there you
ladies
go.
and gentlemen, he made our thumb on our thumbnail. But like, you know, the replay of him catching that touchdown pass, and like it took 16 minutes for him to make it into the end zone. You know, but he made it. But it's just a classic Lions replay for us to watch. So Manu, listen, I don't know how long we got to live through it on this. You know, they're watching the practice reps, and from a depth perspective, yeah. And you look at his draft position, you know, like we probably could have gotten him maybe off, you know, undrafted. It's a bummer. There's a couple of those picks where Holmes was just like, you know, he saw something and it's just doesn't seem to be panning out. We'll see what happens there. You know, Holmes' track record, we'll see as far as retention rate. So Brent, let me ask you this. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say there are a handful of offensive tackles that are going to be free agents, and we'll get more into it as we approach free agency. But you know, Jermaine Eleanor, Rasheed Walker, Braxton Jones, you know, the Bears, the Packers, the Giants, and Rob Havenstein. You know, he's up a little bit long in tooth now out of Nebraska many years ago. Braden Smith, Trent Brown of Houston. So again, it goes back to how much money are the Lions going to have in free agent dollars to spend on a tackle, a center. I know we're going to get into that in just a minute, but you know, we need to do some rejiggering here of contracts, which I think I'd like to do an analysis for next week for those folks that might be interested in that. Where can we do some maneuvering in the salary cap if we can't get to that tonight to be able to get to, you know, signing some of these free agents to fill these massive holes that we have. And look, the bottom line, every team has holes. Every team has needs. And frankly, Dan was a big staunch defender of Christian Mahogany when I was critical of him. And you know, after going back and looking at the numbers, is he a starting guard? Probably. What do we get out of Tate Ratledge in terms of growth? Looking more now at the internal side of it. So draft an offensive tackle, sign a free agent offensive tackle. I think both are definitely options on the table. And I was watching the first bowl game the other day, and there's a kid who's like 6'10", and he moved really well. He was kind of like Manu. And if Manu doesn't work out at left tackle, put him, as Dan said, at right tackle, and even consider putting the guy at guard, because once he gets engaged, it's hard to break loose of that massive man who is just strong. He's pretty agile. So you know, Dan may be onto something that we hadn't talked about, and that is he in the wrong position?
Yeah. See, you guys are dancing around this, but I'm absolutely gonna like make you guys talk about this. And you know, listen, this is a long off season, so like we can rewind the tape and go, hey, remember when Dan said this, or remember when Brent said this? But the fact of the matter is, we've got a number of players on this offensive line that can play multiple positions on that offensive line, and that's always been a thing for Brad Holmes, for Dan Campbell, for Fraley. So, Brent, you brought up Tate Ratledge. We hadn't talked about Ratledge. Nobody's really, I mean, we kind of mentioned him in passing, but Frazier's played all over the line when he was at LSU.
Sub center.
Ratledge has also played, you know, some center. So it makes you wonder: are we kind of like, are they getting these reps to where you can actually get a good sample size on what Tate Ratledge looks like at center? A lot of people were saying that early on, even before the preseason, like, hey, Ratledge may be the next center, right? Because Ragnow's out, so that's the replacement, you know, for him. And what does that do? Now what does that do at guard? Because Ratledge would move to center. And there's all those things, like, we just think, oh, well, he can play anything and it's just going to work. It doesn't always work out like that. So guys, I want to put this on there. So you've got Ratledge, you've got Frazier, you got Mahogany. These are linemen that we feel confident in, right? And then of course Penei Sewell, arguably the best tackle in the game. And potentially he can move to either side. He played left tackle at Oregon, so it's not like it's a big, but he's played right tackle since 2021, since he's been here. So let's talk about it. It conceivably, in your estimation, let's just say the draft falls where they want it. We've got holes at safety. We've got holes in the defense. We've got all kinds of different things. Where do you see the offensive line? Talk to me about, let's go left tackle to right. Let's go left to right.
Well, there's two scenarios we got to cover.
Okay,
right?
do it.
With and without Decker. So with Decker, I see it as Decker, Mahogany, Ratledge, Frazier, Sewell.
Okay.
Without Decker, I see it as Sewell, Mahogany, Ratledge, and Frazier, one of those two positions on the right side with either a draft pick or a free agent,
okay,
filling in that other spot. And it could be center too. The Wyatt Teller's out there, from the old Browns guy. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. And then again, that's just, using the spare parts we have on the team right now. They could say screw it and go all in, like back in the early 90s. We went out and signed Bill Fralick and a couple other guys the guy from San Diego, the big right tackle, and we started 3 brand new guys. I mean, they could go that route. I don't see that, but
David Lutz.
Yeah, David Lutz. Thank you. Look
Bill
at that.
Fralick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
plug him in around Glover, around Kevin Glover.
Yeah. I don't see them going that route.
Okay, boomers, we're losing all the young people in the chat now.
They're going to go with the guys we got. So, Brett, what do you think?
Well, here's what I think. I just saw Chase's comment, and I love it, except I'll disagree with you, Chase, and here's why.
Which comment?
The comment about the free agent center options are less than the tackle. Mike Terry posted this, and you can pop his comment up. I put a celebration, a heart, a thumbs up, and a clap. My number one target for the Lions should be Linderbaum. So building out, Dan's comment, depth is so important in the NFL on the offensive line. And I think we're in a really good position. I don't get the idea that Ratledge is a center. I just, they tried him at center for 2 days at practice and it just didn't work. I mean, maybe he's all off season practicing snapping, but he's not a natural center. And frankly, he's not even, yet a really good guard, right? He's kind of like Mahogany was his rookie year. I would love it if the Lions could keep Ratledge and Mahogany at guard with Frazier developing as the guy that's standing ready and waiting to step in if there's an injury. I love the idea of Tyler Linderbaum in a Lions uniform. He's a guy that, Dan, you may remember when we were drafting when he was coming out of college. We all were big fans of Tyler Linderbaum, and so he's a guy that I would absolutely love to see in a Lions uniform. And then
he might be the most expensive free agent offensive interior lineman that's available. But DaCosta's an idiot for not slapping the 5th-year option on the kid.
Yeah.
But I get it. He's a center, and you don't want to pay the center top 10 tackle money because that's what would have happened with that option.
Well,
he hit the Pro Bowl, right?
Here is the bottom line. Restructure Goff, restructure Barnes, restructure Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's a lot,
$100 and some million with restructuring guys.
Yes, you've been saying that, and I'm, I've done some work this week, just kind of looking at the numbers, and the truth of the matter is we've got plenty of money for restructuring, and if the Lions are taking the same approach to the offensive line, which I think Holmes and Campbell are both of the belief that the offensive line is core to success for this football team. 15-2 with a great offensive line, 9-7 with scraps, right? And so we got to draft a tackle for maybe 2 for developmental reasons, first, second, third round kind of guys, and then pick up somebody later. and look at free agency. There's just tons of, I don't know what it is this year. There's a lot of free agents at tackle, and obviously if we can't get Linderbaum, I think we got to draft a center. I think I just don't see what we have today as sufficient.
Yeah, and I want to touch on this because Detroit Fan Man talks on this, and this is Dan brought this up a few weeks ago when this signing happens. Detroit Fan Man says, looking at your list, wondered who Seth McLaughlin was. Turns out he won the Remington in 2024 at OSU, best center in college. Don't we already have a center now? So let's not. I mean, there are holes, and we've been honest about that. Dan's talked about that as well. But yeah, we can't forget. Like this was a good signing. Based on need.
He's played against the best of the best too, right? The guy
Dan,
played 2 years at Alabama and a year at Ohio State. And he didn't make it. I think he popped his Achilles for the Michigan game, right? Brent, right? So he didn't play in that, and he wasn't on the Natty run, but he was the best center in school that year, and he had won it, I think, as a freshman or sophomore at Alabama too. And he's got a few shortcomings, mainly with his arms, but we were joking about that today.
Aiden has short arms.
I mean,
T-Rex.
so does Aiden Hutchinson, and he's just like whatever. He's got, he's got T-Rex arms, right?
When I'm out to eat dinner, Dan, with Brent, he gets alligator arms when the check comes. In the combine, they tell me he has short arms at the dinner table.
Yeah. So I mean, he's coming off of major surgery, so I love the sign just because he signed with the Bengals. He was on their practice squad. But he was also coming off of Achilles tear. So, I think that this gives us an opportunity to see if the kid's got a future, we'll get it out of him. Fraley will get it out of him. If it's not, then, he develops into a long-term backup guy. So, regardless, I think it was a good signing, and he may be the guy. I mean, Jason Kelsey was undrafted, right? Right.
Yep. You guys are going to see this year. We're doing a live draft chat. We have for 30 something years done draft chats, and Dan is my witness. Mike Terry is my witness. I was going nuts. I wanted the Lions to pick up this guy as an undrafted free agent. I wanted us to pick him up in the 7th round, and so I think he would be a fantastic guy. Again, I am all about starter depth. I don't want us to go find ourselves in the position that we're in this year, where when somebody goes down, you gotta sort the whole offensive line again. And so, having a guy that won the Remington Award, who we were big fans of, and Dan, you may remember when we were in the chat, everybody started going, yeah, what about this guy? And Dan's like, yeah, he won the Remington Award at Ohio State. And so we were big fans. He signed with the Bengals. We were all disappointed because Dan, he was one of the first guys to sign. Dan every year publishes the UFA list, but make a run. And I don't disagree with Chase's comment, right? That he's going to be pricey, but the cost of not doing it, I think, it outweighs the cost of having those conversations. And Linderbaum, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. If they don't make him a franchise tag guy, he's going to free agency. And who would not want to sign with the talent that the Lions
25 years
have?
old.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he may not hit free agency. Let's just be honest. If DaCosta has his way, he's going to get the kid signed well before free agency window opens. That was the whole point. You don't give the 5th-year option to a center when it's calculating every offensive lineman together, because that's your starting point for when you start negotiating with them. And no one's going to pay left tackle dollar, to a starting center, regardless how good they are, even if they're a free agent. So, or a Pro Bowler and so forth. So shrewd move, but DaCosta might Linderbaum might feel a little disrespected too, right?
He may not sign the deal because of that.
Exactly. So
he may not sit down and shut up and take what
you
they
can start
give him.
introducing me as big man, because
you guys are taking jabs.
That's how I am known by
it was
Lions
big fella.
players.
It was big fella.
Big fella. The big fella.
All right, big fellas, it's time to roll into my favorite segment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Gray Main's Hall of the Underrated. All right, it's time for Lions Gray Manes Hall of the Underrated. And this is one of my absolute favorite Lions growing up in Romeo, Michigan, 32 Mile and Van Dyke, ladies and gentlemen. Loved watching this guy as a part of the Silver Rush. And that is the one and the only Doug English. Doug English played defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions from 1975 to 1985 with a one-year hiatus in 1980 that we will discuss. 4-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro, and a cornerstone, as I mentioned, of the Silver Rush defensive line. Recorded 59 career sacks, and by the way, when they started recording sacks, that's his career total because they started recording sacks at a particular time. He's 6th all-time in Lions history, holds the NFL record with 4 career safeties, including 2 in the 1983 season alone, which is also an NFL record. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2011 when he played for the Longhorns at the University of Texas, and he's also a member of the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame, inducted in 2015. Yet somehow, gentlemen, his name doesn't come up in the same breath as other Lions defensive legends. Brent, give us the Doug English scouting report. What kind of player was he, and what made him special?
That Silver Rush, I distinctly remember, Al Bubba Baker sticking out and getting all the accolades. But that unit was what they were because I believe Doug English, how tough he was. The guy was just physically a menace. And if you watch his highlights, for those of you that are younger Detroit Lions fans, he's a guy that I would actually Google and go back and watch his highlights. There were highlights of him tackling Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer when you call up his YouTube highlight. Tony Dorsett, 8-yard loss on a run. Greg, what was his name? Roger Staubach getting sacked. Terry Bradshaw getting sacked. Him just absolutely demolishing people. And so he's one of those special players to me. And forgive me, Chris, if you said this and I missed it, but he was one of 4 players that we all anonymously put in, and we all selected him as a nominee for this illustrious honor to be selected, right? And so when you go through the Lions history and you look at Luther Ellis, you look at Robert Porcher, you look at
Wheelchair,
Al Bubba Baker, Sean Rogers, Mike Sawson. Shout out to you, my friend. Hope you're well. He when he popped in the draft chat and said wheelchair, just rolled in. We were like, what? And so Sean Rogers was famous for being rolled in on a wheelchair. But Doug English does not get named on most of those lists, Chris.
Crazy.
It's crazy because the guy, 10 seasons, he ended up with 55.5 sacks. And as you pointed out, they didn't keep it as a statistic his first 4 years, was it? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
And he was just a game wrecker. We talked about Corey Schlesinger last week and what he did leading and breaking face masks. Doug English is a guy that was just a tower of a man, 6'5". He was always in the backfield. He's coming off the edge. And there's a lot of players like him that have played on other teams that I'd like to point out. Remember the Manster, Randy White?
Oh, yeah.
Harvey Martin. I wouldn't have picked those guys over Doug English. No. I kid you not.
Yeah.
And Doug English, it's an absolute shame that he does not get the recognition for the type of player he was. So let me turn it over to you guys to add any additional color.
Dan, Brent mentioned this a little bit, but Doug English was a game wrecker for 4 years, but then he took a hiatus in 1980. Yep. He was so disheartened they went 2-14 in the 79 season. His body was broken, right? And then he sat out the entire 1980 campaign. Talk about that and who the player was before and after.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was actually playing well. You know, you go back and you look, he had a, as a rookie, he didn't start any games, but he got in and he played decent. His second year, he had some injury issues, only got in 7 games and started 5. And I think he then missed some games. But then the next few years, he played really well. He's very consistent. You know, it wasn't an official stat, but they would say he recorded 8, 7, and 6.5 sacks those years. And again, this is a defensive tackle. This isn't,
Yep.
this isn't an edge or a linebacker like
Yes.
we're all used to now. It wasn't LT coming off the edge. It wasn't Randy White coming off the edge. Reggie White, whoever, right? This was an interior defensive tackle who was 6'5", 265, 260, whatever. By today's standards, he's small. I mean, there's an article written by the great Mike O'Hara where he talked to and went through this process with Doug and talked to him about this. And Doug's like, when I started in, it was 75, I was a giant, 6'5", whatever. When I ended in 85, I was small. He's like,
This is crazy.
the game grew past him while he was there, and yet he was still a wrecker. He missed that year. And O'Hara touched on this in his article. If you don't have it, it's on the Lions website. If you've never read it, I would strongly recommend reading it. And it talks about how, he sat out, as Brett pointed out, the team was just awful. They were 2-14. He was beat up. His neck was screwed up. So he sat the whole year out. And he basically he refound himself, and we were talking a little bit before this, and Brent mentioned, he took the pressure off himself. He focused on his businesses that year. He was out of the game. He thought he was done, honestly, and he focused on himself, focused on his businesses. And then he also had an incident where I guess a young fan at some point came up to him in the first year he was back, and he talked to him and he gave him some advice, and then he was shocked because I guess this kid's mother called him or sent him a note, I believe,
Yep.
sent him a letter telling him basically that after this kid who was a bit of a malcontent, like a young Dr. Brent, he'd straighten his life out, right? And
True.
he took the advice that was given to him by Doug, straightened his life out, and just changed this kid's life. And all of this was like huge for Doug for him to go in and just play. And Brent, you nailed it earlier. Play just like free, right? He just not played the game and had fun. He didn't worry about anything. And he had 1 year where he earned some honors. I think he was a Pro Bowler in 78 or something like that. So like 2 years before his injury. But when he came back, he just Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, AP, All Pro, All Pro, All Pro. He even received Defensive Player of the Year vote in 1983 when he had 13 sacks from an interior position. I mean, come on.
That is insane.
Defensive tackle, tall, skinny guy, playing D tackle, getting 13 sacks. Are you kidding me?
250, 250,
250.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing, and this is a guy that you just he persevered through injury, persevered through immense pressure he was putting on himself to perform. He was a giant until he wasn't. The game grew past him physically with the interior. These guys, the linemen got bigger around him, the linemen got bigger in front of him. And yet, he was the key cog of that silver rush. Brent nailed it. You Baker and all those guys, Kofor, they keyed off of Doug English because English freed them up. I mean, if we had McNeil playing before pre-injury McNeil this year, like we saw last year, he was unblockable.
Yeah.
He freed up Hutch. He made the other guys, when you have to dedicate interior guys to a guy inside that can do everything, that's what Doug did a long time ago. And we're all better for it to have watched him. It gives you better appreciation for the game of somebody that I mean, look at that. He's got those freaking hand pads on, the old school ones.
I saw this story where I forget who it was. It was somebody when he was at Texas. I think it was his head coach when he was at Texas, and he said that Doug English is all elbows and shoulders.
Yes. You could punch somebody with one of those in the
like
pile
that.
too, and you wouldn't hurt yourself.
Yeah. The two fans joining us is that he or she really likes the selection for this week's Hall of the Underrated. Keep it coming, fellas. Enjoying it every week. Go Lions. I'm glad you touched on that personal story, Dan. That was what resonated with me, and I think I first read it in the O'Hara article as well. That once he figured, hey, listen, there's more than just this. I'm only going to play this game for, 8 or 10 years at most. So why don't I really focus on what I'm going to do after this? And the fact of the matter is, and I'll roll this to you, Brent. English owns the NFL record with 4 career safeties. This is tied with Ted Hendricks. Remember the stork from the Oakland Raiders? Jared Allen, the captain of the Mullets, and, of course, Justin Houston as well. And he's the only NFL player to record 2 in a single season twice, which is absurd. So that just tells you, like, the skill set, the guy that was an absolute game wrecker. Brent, why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? The NFL Hall of Fame. Why is Doug English maybe never going to get considered for the NFL Hall of Fame?
Why is he not in the Ring of Honor? Why is he not in the Hall of Fame? Why, these questions are questions that I think Lions fans like us have asked for years. The guy, Dan, I know that I hadn't posted the list of all the players that played with him earlier. Was trying to put them in here, but you guys may remember this. Bill Gay, Dave Purifoy.
Oh, yeah.
Kofer. Michael Kofer.
Yep.
Mike Fanning, Steve Furness. Oh, my gosh. Curly Culp. The names that he played with. And I'm telling you, I really believe he was the best of all of them. And Bubba Baker had a lot of sacks, record season in sacks. But you would have a hard time finding a lot of guys. And if you put them up, it's sort of like Lou Whitaker. The same thing with Lou Whitaker. You put Lou Whitaker's stats against the second baseman that are in the Hall of Fame, and incredibly comparable. I would bet you that if you looked at the full list of all the defensive tackles in the Hall of Fame, that Doug English would be right there with them. Yeah. So it's a good question, Chris. I can't answer other than to say that sometimes
maybe he played for the Detroit Lions, and that's the reason.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And not winning is a big part of that for Lions. Great players, like Schlesinger and I mean, we can go down the list of guys that we were just talking about tonight. These guys, if they had been on the Steelers or the Cowboys, would be in the NFL Hall of Fame, hands down.
Or Cowboys,
Steelers. And then the 80s 49ers. I mean,
sure.
The teams that won a lot, they have a disproportionate number of players in the Hall of Fame. Not disproportionate in a bad way. It's rightful probably that, they distinguish themselves by winning the ultimate, games. But he is one that it was great to see that we all picked him to be on the list.
The unanimous Gray Mains inductee into the Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated, the one and the only Doug English. Gentlemen, this has again been an amazing show. Folks, go collect all the Doug English football cards that you possibly can. I'm sure you can probably get them for a couple of bucks. And go and watch some of those highlights of Doug English. You'll be happy that you did. And I know there's a lot of people with the Texan, fans of the University of Texas Hook'em Horns that know that this man is an absolute legend in college as well, in the college in the College Football Hall of Fame as well. And I love this segment. I love the passion that I get to have about this whole thing, but watching you guys and you guys talking about watching these players, it's a lot of fun. And so we'll wrap tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Lions Gray Mains. We'll be back again next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Set your clock, set your timers, and if you don't make it, we're still going to be up there on replay, but it's a lot more fun when you can join us, like Chase, like Wanda, like Detroit fan, all the folks that have joined us here in the chat. And as always, we end and tell everyone to go Lions.
Go Lions.
Busts it outside left. Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
Hand off Barry. Skirts to the left side. Breaks the tackle. And he will take it in.